everyone. It's Your Natural Dog with Angela Ardolino, and he's back. I've got Jason Scott, my mycologist for Myco Dog, our medicinal mushroom tinctures for pets. We ran out of time in our last podcast, so we're continuing the conversation on medicinal mushrooms for dogs, how to dose them, what they're good for, coming up next.
So this is Bruce. Bruce is a 12-year-old pug, and he has had a lot of issues over his life, but for the past several years, he's had a really weird hacking, coughing issue that no one has been able to get under control. It's nothing infectious, it's just kind of a result of his little flat-faced breed and the respiratory issues they usually deal with. And I have finally found something that worked. It's called Breathe by Myco Dog. It's a mushroom extract. And it has been incredible how quickly I saw results. Literally overnight, I saw a difference in the hacking and coughing, especially during the night he was doing it. So the Breathe tincture has really made a huge difference for him, not only with his breathing, but just overall supporting his immune system, since he has 2 other dogs in our household. They go to daycare every day and bring home various germs and respiratory bugs themselves, and he has been totally healthy and clear of any issues since being on this tincture. So we're just super grateful that finally something is out there for these flat-faced breeds to breathe better and live a happier life.
Hey everybody, Angela Ardolino with Your Natural Dog, and I've got my favorite Myco alchemist here, Jason Scott, and he is the formulator and expert that helped me develop our pet tinctures for Myco Dog, which I created to they're tinctures that I all used on my dogs. Vitality, that is basically the combination of mushrooms. You introduced me to red-belted conk and artist conk, so I can't wait to tell people, our listeners, about that. But this is the combination of mushrooms that are helping my dog Nina with her osteosarcoma, who she is 2 years, more than 2 years now, out from her diagnosis, and she is thriving. I also, my old man Schnauzer Odie, who is 15 years old now, I actually have the Breathe and Clarity for him because he's so old. And, but the Clarity was because I got rid of the cancer in my dogs and I lost 2 of them, Potato and Daisy, to dementia, to CCD, canine cognitive disease. Disease, I think it is, which is Alzheimer's. So knowing lion's mane and Reishi's power and what it can do for these geriatric dogs, I have literally watched Odie, my 15-year-old, go from having no interest to eating, which I don't know if people know this. People who die from Alzheimer's die because they no longer know how to eat or drink. And that's what happened to my dogs. I did not know this. And so I literally watch him lose interest to take his mushrooms and eat like a monster the next day. I literally can see a difference in my dog's behavior and health by giving him these mushrooms. Like even like I have 3 tinctures. So, changing them up. One's not breathe in, sounds like he maybe has a little respiratory something. So I love it. It's like 3 more things that I can have in my medicine cabinet where I can treat my dogs all naturally. So I love it. This is why we created them, because I couldn't find anybody, couldn't find a product that I trust and loved. And so here I am again, making one with the help of the expert like you. Jason, thank you so much. I just got done talking to you for an hour, for 30 minutes, and we decided we needed another 30 minutes so we could answer all the questions, because so many pet parents believe in this, want to do it, understand the power. They've already seen what natural herbs and cannabis can do for their pets. So they love that there's this new thing that will cause no harm. It'll only help them. But they have so many questions, and which mushrooms are good, and what is it better to put more than one mushroom together, which is the whole reason why I wanted to do several, is because they work so well together. So thank you again for coming back.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, Angela.
You bet. So let's start talking about the different types of mushrooms, because, what we see a lot of is in the hype is turkey tail and reishi and lion's mane are getting a lot of attention. Let's start with turkey tail, because turkey tail, I think we know the most about because it's just research has come out where it's proving that it's got these anti-cancer properties, medicines in them. So let's start with turkey tail, because of course it's one of my favorites. It's one of the easiest to grow, along with lion's mane, except lion's mane is awesome to eat also.
Yeah, you're not really going to cook up turkey tail. I mean, the first thing I like to mention too, whenever going into a conversation about medicinal mushrooms and their uses, is that a lot of mushrooms have a lot of things in common so far as what they kind of support with. So I kind of look at mushrooms at twofold. I look at kind of like what mushrooms do in general that most mushrooms are going to do, primarily because of the sort of universal primary compounds known as polysaccharides or beta glucans. So that's generally going to be like immune support, healthy inflammation support, healthy blood sugar regulation, healthy inflammation support. There's a handful of things that all of the mushrooms kind of do generally, and it's the trickiest thing if you ever like look at literature for medicinal mushrooms and how to use them, because you get these long laundry lists and it's like, okay, well, that doesn't really specify like how I should use this one particularly. So I always kind of start there as like, okay, there's like a baseline. And that's kind of the nice thing with the formulas too, right? And what I always tell people is like, oh, you know, the side effect that you get is that it's going to help with other things as well. So like the clarity formula is also going to help with digestion, because like the lion's mane that's in there and the reishi that's in there is bitter and things like that. So we'll talk more about formulas here in a minute, but turkey tail definitely is one of the sort of most premier mushrooms. I think the three that you mentioned, the turkey tail, the lion's mane, the reishi, are pretty well known, and I think that's also for a pretty good reason. They are really tried and true to a large degree. I think turkey tail being one of the mushrooms that has been used in association with more modern treatment and therapy for cancer for quite a while. And one of the subsets of compounds in there are the PSP, or the protein-bound polysaccharides, and the PSK, two sets of protein-bound polysaccharides that are helping to. I look at the polysaccharides in mushrooms kind of like as like building blocks to our innate immune system, and I like to, instead of saying that mushrooms are immune stimulating, or immune depressing, which is typically an action that you find in herbs. Either the herb is immune stimulating, like something like echinacea, or immunodepressing. Mushrooms are known as immunomodulants, or what I like to
just
refer
like
to
cannabis.
Exactly, and what I like to refer to as they have immune intelligence. So I kind of think of it in the way that whatever your immune system needs, those polysaccharides are kind of giving your innate immune system the building blocks that it needs to be able to support itself, including sort of like building up the arsenal of cells that it needs to defend itself, and in terms of like marking abnormal cell growth and things like that, which is one of the primary reasons that cancer really gets out of hand. So turkey tail is really primarily known for that, and we found both through the research that's available and also through our kind of direct practice that it has a really strong affinity for the reproductive system, and a really strong affinity for the kidneys and the liver, as well as the digestion, with those polysaccharides. Oftentimes in most mushrooms, those polysaccharides are going to be prebiotic, so just helping to feed healthy gut flora. So again, it's one of the other side effects of taking a formula for something like cancer or some sort of infection.
Destroys your microbiome in your gut. Yep. and this is going to not only help. So I remember, so I have an autoimmune disease. Sometimes I'm not sure I still have it, but I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is how I found cannabis in the first place. And adding medicinal mushrooms into what I do, I mean, the things that are different, where my flare-ups, I've had one, I think, this year. And it's been one of the stressful, craziest years of my life. And I've had one flare up, and I know it's the mushrooms. I know it's the combination of the cannabis and mushrooms are doing its work. And what's funny is that I know people are like, oh, well, you can't. What an autoimmune disease is my immune system overreacting.
Right.
So people were like, well, you can't take mushrooms or cannabis. That's going to stimulate your immune system. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It's going to help calm that down.
Yeah.
So people don't understand it, that there is a difference between that some herbs are going to stimulate and some aren't. And that's not what mushrooms and cannabis do. They actually bring, what does it need to happen? They also belong to a group of plants and fungi called adaptogens, where they literally get inside your body and adapt to what your body needs. And when you put them together, they work even more synergistically. Not to interrupt you. And they do. They've made a cancer drug, both in cannabis and from mycelium of mushrooms, that are just isolates, where just one compound is taken out and used in conjunction with chemotherapy or radiation. Well, guess what, folks? If you were to use all of the mushroom and all of the cannabis, you won't need the radiation or chemotherapy in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially for your pet. I'm speaking for my pet.
Definitely. And yeah, I think that was one of the first things that I learned about turkey tail too, is those protein bound polysaccharides. They make a drug from it. I think it's Creston, or it's named after the person who helped to discover it. But the government actually pays for people to take that polysaccharide in conjunction with their chemotherapy or radiation.
Well, I know that I'm trying to remember the THC one what the name of it is now. I mean, I used to know the name of all of them, that they do the same. It's kind of the same type of thing. But yeah, these are things you guys can do on your own and prevent and treat yourself for these nasty things, especially cancer. All right, so turkey tail, great. But again, we've got to extract those compounds, and the way it's extracted is important, and then how it's preserved and then served up to you, which I remember one of the things that I came to you about was, I was like, okay, you're my guy. Now I want you to tell me what everyone else is doing. So, of course, I showed you what everyone else is doing, what their claims were, and you would just scratch your head and go, how? What? So what people don't understand is that nobody's standardizing. There's no testing labs. This is a problem in the cannabis industry, too. They're literally giving out grants for people to open up testing labs so that they can literally test the products to prove to us that they are pure and that they really are what they are. What they claim to be is in that bottle. Yeah. That doesn't really exist. And if it does, what are we testing for? What are the standards? So hopefully this might be something that comes up later. But who knows? So we have to be educated on it. Yeah. So when I showed you what the others were doing, were you just like, what?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of constantly perplexed at what others are doing. I think I saw recently a company that is claiming to make wholesale mushroom extracts at a 10-to-1 ratio. And for anybody out there who doesn't understand, 10-to-1 would be 10 grams of mushroom per 1 milliliter of menstruum or extract. And at the method that we use to make it, it's like that would be like a paste. That would be a thick paste. You would not be able to get it into a tincture bottle, and even if you did, you wouldn't be able to draw it up into the dropper. So there's definitely a large gap between the understanding, and it's like, is that a 10-to-1 wet mushrooms or 10-to-1 dried mushrooms? Because mushrooms dry to like 10% of their weight.
So for the layman, picture that grams are the actual, we have harvested the fruiting bodies and we're weighing the raw material in grams. And you're basically saying this many grams equals this much in a tincture, or in milligrams when you extract everything, correct?
Yeah.
So when they say 10 to 1, it doesn't compute. And I'm going to assume I know who you're talking about. And what they do that's different is that they take the extraction and then they freeze dry it. So are they calling it a 10 to 1 in the finished freeze dried part?
Well,
which means what we're explaining.
Yeah, so there
then
are actual
someone
companies
takes that and then they put that into a tincture, which they would not be able to do because it would be paste.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say because there's just so many people out there doing it, and as you were saying, it's like there's not really a standardization around even like the language. And just kind of going back to what we were mentioning, like with your RA is rheumatoid arthritis for those out there that might not know, but it's like if you were to take a myceliated grain product, like that grain is likely going to agitate and inflame the arthritic condition even more, right? So it's like you don't want that to happen. And we've had that a number of times where we've had people come to us and be like,
I don't want sugar either for someone who has cancer.
Right. And we've had people come to us and be like, I can't take mushrooms because they just don't settle well and my stomach gets, I'm like, okay. But then they end up buying a bunch of mushrooms from us and then they're like, oh, these worked. And it's like, my biggest theory on that is like, well, there's no rice in there. There's no oats in there. So there's nothing in there that for somebody who's potentially sensitive to those things, it's going to aggravate that.
Right.
But yeah, standardization around the language and what's being produced is really tricky because I think that there are companies that are actually doing like 8 to 1, 10 to 1 extracts, right, from products. I've also seen ones that are claiming that they're doing like 100 to 1 extract, which again is like, it's like I feel like at a certain level, you can just do a more effective extract and get more of those bioavailable compounds because it doesn't really matter. Like if you put, 100 grams of mushrooms into some sort of like liquid extract, if you're not getting an effective extract, it doesn't really matter how many grams, and you can say whatever you want.
Got it.
And it's gonna
kind of the same thing with cannabis. Yeah.
Right. It's gonna sound good, but it's like the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Where I've looked at like our extracts side to side to others who say that they're making a stronger extract, and it's like, well, which one tastes stronger? It's like you can see and you can tell the difference in that. So,
and then like tincture versus, or in our case, I still call our stuff tinctures, even though they're not an alcohol. So I wanted to make sure because some of my homeopaths are not happy that I call them tinctures, and my full spectrum cannabis tinctures, they don't like them because they don't have alcohol in them and they're in oil. I'm like, look, this is a new thing. You guys weren't even doing this, so we're going to make that exception. I'm still going to call them that. But I think we took.
Technically, what you might call it is a glycerite because we're using glycerin as the base to help preserve it instead of alcohol, which is more safe for the dogs to take. But that's the thing too, is a lot of some companies I've seen out there are actually extracting with the glycerin, which the glycerin just isn't really an effective extraction menstruum for the mushrooms.
What about... Right, I saw that, and I saw something else. I didn't even know what it is. Methanol or something?
Yeah, methanol is
look it up. I was like...
Yeah, methanol is an effective extraction method for mushrooms, but you have to get all of that solvent out of the final extract.
Back out.
Which is the hardest part. And then, you're always potentially left with residuals, and those are kind of some of the different types of... menstruums that they use for extraction in the cannabis and the CBD industry, and they have to test at the end for kind of like but since the mushroom industry is so new, nobody's making sure people are testing for things like that. We use ethanol because it acts relatively similar to methanol, maybe not quite the same, but all the ethanol we're using is potable. So we're using like a 95% organic cane alcohol. So we don't have to worry about if there's a little bit residual left in, or if there's the alcohol in our tinctures for people. We don't have to worry about that because it's potable and people can drink it without having to worry about it. Methanol is not the same. Methanol is not okay for people to drink or to consume. Same with like acetone. You wouldn't want to do that on a high level.
Right. Right. And the same thing goes with cannabis. I think that's why it's so easy to understand how this works, because it has so much in common with cannabis. But, oh my God, what did I want to ask you? Okay. So one of the reasons that I was more interested in a tincture versus a freeze-dried powder is that I just like my cannabis and the food I feed my dogs, I wanted to do the least amount of processing as possible. So that was my biggest reason. I also liked I had more control over dosing or a tincture or putting it in their mouth versus their food or whatever. I just prefer it. It's my way to go. I don't make a freeze-dried hemp product, so I didn't want to make a freeze-dried mushroom product. But what are some of the other benefits of having a tincture versus a powder? Because you told me some information which makes sense with anything that's freeze-dried or a powder, that it oxidizes the moment that you start using it. So what else are some of the benefits of doing it in a tincture instead of freeze-dried?
Yeah, so
or a powder.
Yeah, so preservation is a huge one. So as you just mentioned, when you have something in a liquid form and it's in an airtight container like a bottle, it's going to be preserved for much longer. And especially when something's prepared in more like the spagyric method, it's considered to sort of age like a fine wine. So it really kind of like gets better over time, especially when it's like an alcohol-based tincture. But it's going to be less prone to oxidation, whereas like you mentioned, a powder, and that's one of the things is like we work with as fresh mushrooms as we can get, and then we process them as soon as we get them. Awesome. They're dried, but we process them as soon as we get them, because if they're just sitting on a shelf for a long time, and that's the hardest part, is like how long have those mushrooms been sitting on a shelf? It's pretty often generally accepted that any dried or powdered herb that's been sitting for over a year is more or less not effective, or not nearly as effective,
or loses its potency. Same thing goes
from the
cannabis.
And from the alchemical perspective, it's kind of like lost its vital force, right? So the other benefit besides having that integrity held intact is that tinctures are oftentimes much more bioavailable as they absorb through the mucous membranes, instead of like a powder, similar to like a food. When you ingest it, it still has to be metabolized through the liver and kind of digested like a normal food before it can make it into the bloodstream. Whereas tinctures are oftentimes going to go right through the mucous membrane. And that's why a lot of people suggest taking things sublingually. Obviously, it's a little trickier with the dog, but even if you swallow a tincture, it's going to be mostly absorbed before it makes it down into the gut.
Which is another reason why we take alcohol out of the pet tinctures, is because I don't know if any of you have ever given a dog an alcohol tincture, but I've never seen a dog be able to get something a liquid out of their mouth faster than the faces they make. So it is so much easier, and they actually enjoy it, and it has kind of a sweet taste to it versus them running from me, because that alcohol just burns their gums or tongue or whatever, and freaks them out.
Yeah, glycerin is kind of naturally sweet, and the dogs seem to really love it.
Awesome. All right, so let's go back to some of these mushrooms, because I know we got off tangent. Let's talk about reishi.
Yeah, so reishi, one of my favorite mushrooms, and kind of like the center of the myco lore, if you were. The reishi the king is one of the longest used medicinal mushrooms, and in China it was known as the 10,000-year mushroom, or the mushroom of immortality. I'm the way that I work with herbs, the way that I work with mushrooms, I try to get really specific with how we apply them, and I don't really look at many things as being like a panacea or something that you can generally use for most everything. But if I were to pick one, it's like reishi would be like the most generally used and most safe, as well as just really effective. So we have this whole like other ethereal side that we do with everything, where we're processing under the planetary correspondence and things as well, kind of along with the tradition of alchemy. I just did a whole podcast on that as well. But we associate reishi with the sun, right? Because the sun is associated with the heart and then with the venous system, but also with just vitality. So I look at reishi as like the mushroom of vitality. So it's just really, really rich in its ability to kind of build and help the natural force. And we also just have a lot of research indicating that reishi can be really helpful with pretty much every system to some degree. It's like you look and it's like, oh, well, reishi can be hyperprotective or helping to support healthy liver. Reishi can be anti-inflammatory. Reishi can help to support healthy immune system. Reishi can help to support the nervous system. So it really is broad in its function, and while it's broad in its function, I use it a little bit more generally like that. I'll use it kind of specifically, but a lot of times reishi makes it into my formulas as more of like a supporting mushroom. And that's, you know, there's certain cases, especially if there's like something heart related or some specific type of acute illness, that will go for reishi right away as like the lead. But more often than not, reishi is kind of like ever present. When I formulated all the herbs or all the mushrooms for our blends that we do, I looked at all the formulas afterwards and I was like, oh, reishi kind of snuck into almost every one of these.
Yeah. Same thing, same here.
Yeah, which is, you know, is a good thing. And I think this is a kind of a good segue into talking about formulas a little bit and like why formulas are beneficial, because we personally offer each mushroom as an individual tincture, but the only people who are like really working with them like that are doctors and naturopaths and people who have done research on the mushrooms, and they're formulating themselves, or they know like, oh, I really specifically want this one thing. So we work closely with the mushrooms to really, how I look at it is that we're kind of like exalting the synergies of the different mushrooms. So with the blends, and like the blends that you have, it's like the name is indicating what it's sort of primarily geared for. And as I mentioned earlier, it's like you kind of get the added side effect of that it's going to help with a whole bunch of other things as well. Right. But they're geared towards that because like those mushrooms have an affinity for those systems. So like in your clarity formula, the lion's mane, the reishi, and the cordyceps all have an affinity for the nervous system and for mental health and mental clarity and for focus, for energy that can help with those things and cutting through the brain fog. So those, you know, are powerful on their own for those things, but when you put them together, it's kind of like the mushrooms are like a good analogy would be like a special ops team or something going in and like
the Ghostbusters, right, they all have their talents.
Exactly. They all have their talents and they all support each other, but then they have like one common goal that they're working towards together, and they're like the special team for that. But as I mentioned earlier, you kind of like, along with that mental clarity and focus, you're also going to get healthy gut support. You're also going to get healthy immune support, healthy inflammation support as well.
I love that you're saying this, because I want people to imagine taking a pharmaceutical that doesn't have any harsh side effects, but instead has amazing good side effects. That doesn't exist. It's always, it'll take care of that, but you know, you're going to have diarrhea for 3 days or whatever it is.
Yeah,
you're going to lose your hair, or you're going to wreck your gut. No, imagine this is like the opposite of that. That's why, you know, finding the pure source and what that pharmaceutical was derived from in nature and going to that pure natural source and taking that instead, you're going to get this entourage effect of all of these other wonderful things it does in your body. And which is why it sounds so unbelievable to us. It's like, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to take this for that, this for that. No, one thing. It's all about balancing that immune system and creating homeostasis in your body.
Right. And you have to understand that in natural products, there's a myriad of compounds that are, it's like nature perfected this medicine in the wild that has this myriad of compounds in it. And when you take a full spectrum extract, you're getting all of those things. And there's probably things in there that are hitting different proteins that are sort of balancing the other active compounds. Whereas when you look at it from a myopic perspective and from more of a pharmacological model, you're isolating, you're like, oh, that's the one thing that's working, so we'll take that out, and now it's creating all these side effects. And it's like, well, because you've taken it out of balance, like nothing in nature works like that. So, definitely it's a,
not only do they isolate it, they then make a synthetic
synthesize
version
it. Yeah,
of it.
exactly.
Yeah, so it's not even, forget the fact, but it does not do the same thing when it doesn't have all of those other compounds that it came with. They all have a job. And then what I also loved is your knowledge of the other adaptogens. So it's like, hey, how about astragalus root and ashwagandha? You're like, yeah, bring it on. I loved it. I mean, I just knew I was in the right place and that I had found the right partner to create these tinctures. So thank you so much for existing and doing what you're doing. It may have taken some time, but now here we are. Okay, so reishi, beautiful. We have it in all of our tinctures. Lion's mane, we already talked about a little bit how it was amazing. I think a lot of people know the benefits of shiitake and maitake. I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to talk about a few of these that you introduced me to that people don't know about, and I know are some of your favorites, which are artist conk and red-belted conk. So let's start with artist conk. What are some of the wonderful benefits of that?
Yeah, maybe I'll, for sake of time, just kind of group them together a little bit and talk about them. Great. But artist conk was the Ganoderma applanatum, and then red-belted conk would be the Pharmaceuticals pinicola. They're both mushrooms that grow really well in the wild. The artist conk is also known as white reishi, and being in that Ganoderma genus is going to be like a cousin of the reishi mushroom and have a lot of crossover in the compounds and the support and the benefit that reishi has. But then it kind of has like its own nature as well. And then red-belted conk is actually in the same genus. They just moved agarikon into, and it's really interesting because anything in the Pharmaceuticals genus is the only thing that I've seen that creates this like super thick resinous extract, like to the point where if you extract it too concentrated, it's just solid. And it's bizarre, but the Pharmaceuticals genus, so agarikon, red-belted conk, and then there's another mushroom known as the rosy polypore or rosy conk, the Pharmaceuticals cagendari, that all do that same thing. But those oleoresins are primarily what's being pulled out of there, and it's like the alcohol extract is just like sticky, and it's just so effective and so good. And red-belted conk right next to like something like chaga is known to be one of the highest in natural antioxidants, and then so really supportive for healthy inflammation. We use it a lot for like wounds, especially like in the gut, so like leaky gut type things, and as a prebiotic, again, using it for healthy gut flora. And then again with
that's probably what'll be next is a dog digestive tincture, which the reason we didn't do it is because all three of them can be used for that purpose. Totally, because they, like you said, right. So that's why we didn't. So if someone were to say, hey, which combination would be great for digestion or leaky gut? Because let me tell you what, that is such a problem. Mm-hmm. We'd be able to say one of these tinctures. So the reason that we did them this way and why I love that you did it is because in my stores, I have 2 stores that I watch people come in and try to figure out what's best. And if it's just sitting there saying turkey tail or, these 5 mixes or whatever, they don't know. But my dog is suffering from this. Will that help? So that's how we try to pair them up. And I love that you do that on the human side.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, those two mushrooms are great. And we try to work with some mushrooms that are not quite as popular in that regard. And, they have the added benefit of being wild, which, as we kind of mentioned before, has its own sort of merits to it as well. Good.
Now let's talk about like how much we should give our dogs. So I know that we're already talking about doing a more potent version for vitalities, so that because I'm have to do so many dropperfuls for Nina, who's a giant dog.
Sure.
But one of the things that I want people to understand is that there's no fear with dosing, that it is literally, you can't go wrong. We've got a water soluble product that it's not going to cause them. So you don't need to worry about that. What our concern is to make sure that they get enough to make a difference, which is why it's so important to get, if you do have a mushroom tincture and it is being done the right way and you verified that, is that now we need to be concerned that it has enough mushroom extract in it to even make a difference.
Yeah. And that's where when looking at kind of like parsing out the specific numbers gets really tricky, because again, it's like you can look at all the numbers and some people say that they have higher numbers, but they don't equate to the same. But what we found is, with our extracts, we're hitting, because they're a little bit more, typically they're about 350 milligrams per milliliter. Which is high relative to something like a cannabis tincture, which is typically like 1,000 milligrams for a whole bottle.
Right.
So in our full tincture, you're hitting about almost 10,000 milligrams of mushrooms per bottle. And what we find with people, like 350 milligrams or like one dropperful is more than enough for most people taking it in kind of like a standard fashion. So the way we worked with the dog formulas was to kind of like take that number just down very slightly, because most dogs are not going to be weighing as much as a human. So it's easier to have less. And then as you're talking about looking at doing a more higher strength formula for the smaller percentage of bigger dogs that are out there that could take more.
And this is bigger dogs with aggressive cancer is what, is why I want to make sure she's getting so much of it in her. So what we have on the tinctures is one dropper is a great starting point. You've got a dog that's sicker or older, then we're going to increase that.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a great, for people, typically where I will be is anywhere between 1 to 3 full dropperfuls, where one dropperful is more than sufficient for most people. And yeah, we find that that's a really great starting point, and it's hard because we don't have any sort of like clinical evidence to back it, but we do have a lot of feedback from the people who are using it and practice. Yeah. And, there's something to be said about that as well. Though
it makes a big difference. It's, there's one thing to learn about how something works. When I learned how cannabis works and how to use it in therapeutic situations, I then was like, okay, well, let's try this. And then being able to see it work and okay, every dog is different. And just because I have a dog with the same age, with the same disease, doesn't mean they're going to get the same dose. And this one may react this way and that type of thing. So remember that every animal, including human, is an individual. So everyone's doses and sensitivity. But the great thing about mushrooms is you don't have to worry about them getting a little too psychoactive, because there's literally no psychoactivity except for Reishi. I heard there's Reishi does in high doses has a real calming effect.
I mean, I've heard there's no psychoactivity, but I've done some R&D sessions where we were eating a lot of mushroom extract and non-psilocybin, of course, non-amanita, nothing that would traditionally be known as psychoactive, and definitely get a certain type of elevated from doing that. Not in like a bad way, but I think that's also why we formulated it the way that we did for yours as well, is because I feel like a lot of people have much smaller dogs as well, and it's always easier to give more to like a medium or large size dog than it is to give less to a smaller dog. One. Mm-hmm. And
I love that you did that.
Well, they're generally safe. It's like, I think it's always good to, with anything relatively new, to kind of err on the side of being like a little bit cautious in entering that.
Well, I think it's better to give build up, find their dose instead of too much bring down.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Which is kind of the opposite thing I did when Nina got cancer, but I knew what I was doing. I knew that THC wasn't going to hurt her.
I feel like cancer is a whole different thing, especially if it's something terminal, because it's sort of like a last ditch effort most times. And
exactly.
I push it way hard when it's
so do I.
A heavy situation like that.
Because we literally have nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some questions from our listeners that I'm going to have to put my glasses on for this so that I can see them because they are extremely confused. But we've helped them with dosing, which 350 milligrams or one dropper of our Myco dog tinctures is great. And if you're able to figure out what you're getting from your other mushroom source and that if they are pure, and again, I couldn't find any. That's why I made my own, that weren't in alcohol, because I would love, what did I do first? First, I started giving them your human stuff and I couldn't, everybody was spitting out the alcohol. So this is where we came. We decided to make the ones for dogs. Let's see. We kind of already did this. Can oils help with urinary incontinence in dogs? Which, sure, it depends what it's being caused from. I'm sorry, I'm reading these at the first time
no worries.
for the first time while I have you. So I've heard mushrooms are not grown. Okay, if mushrooms are not grown in their natural environment, do they have the medicinal properties? So this one's asking, we kind of touched on this.
Yeah, we can reiterate.
One mushroom grown in the wild or wild crafted or harvested versus one grown on substrate. This person said oatmeal, which I think some grow on oat.
Yeah.
Which I love because if I remember this, they were like touting the benefits of the beta glucans in the oats.
Right. Right, which is not what you're after. Yeah. So right. If it's, the type of product that I'm thinking of, when you say that, it's most likely like a myceliated grain. So that is definitely not going to have the same sort of medicinal compounds and complexes that you would from a pure fruit body. Most of the time, some mushrooms can grow on just grains, but most of the time it's like a combination of grain and wood or compost, whatever sort of medium the mushroom needs to grow. And so, yes, I think if you're getting down to brass tacks, something grown in the wild is going to have more vitality, is going to be better overall than something that's cultivated. But we have seen that something that is cultivated under the right conditions and the right methods, and when you're getting a pure fruit body, you're getting the pure polysaccharides from the mushrooms. You're not going to get any of the starches or any of the kind of like weird sugars that aren't coming from the mushrooms, and you're not going to get anything outside of the mushroom itself. So while there's a potential, and there's just not enough research to say that wild grown mushrooms are statistically more potent than cultivated mushrooms, that's just kind of my intuitive feeling. You're still getting the benefits from the mushrooms, including the polysaccharides and the secondary metabolites, depending on the mushroom you're using.
Well, awesome. I think that I'm probably going to have you on something else because I'm out of time again. And I know there's still so many questions, but maybe it'll give everyone an opportunity to try these products, Myco Dog's products, the 3 tinctures, and then we can do a follow-up and answer more questions for people. But thank you so much for taking the time to enlighten our audience and tell them about how to pick a product. Tell us, everybody that we can find your human tinctures and your products on feralfungi.com.
Yep.
And then, of course, the pet products are on mycodog.com and yournaturaldog.com. And I think we're doing a coupon code for them, for any of the listeners, where they can get 15% off by putting in, I hate that, that coupon code. I did not come up with this coupon code. The coupon code is Shroom15, but we in the medicinal mushroom world do not refer to them as shrooms, so I apologize, everyone. Forgive me for that. I did not create it. But Shroom15 will get you 15% off at Your Natural Dog on the Myco Dog products that Jason helped me formulate so that we could create some killer, true, pure, done the right way. Thank you so much. Products for our dogs and cats. Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was really fun to work with you on
care.
the project and to put them together. Maybe next time we can do like a little Q&A for some of your listeners too. So thank you, Angela.
I think I'm going to bring you on
me.
like social media. Yeah, I think I'll bring you on like Facebook or something, and we'll have people come on and just ask a million questions.
Sounds great.
Thanks. Take care, Jason.
Alrighty. Bye.